Chapter review. Tax incidence is the division of the burden of a tax between the buyer and the seller, regardless of whether the government taxes the buyer or seller. The buyer pays the same price, the seller receives the same price, and the government receives the same tax revenue on the same quantity. Taxes also creates inefficiency. Taxes acts as a wedge between marginal benefit and marginal cost. The equilibrium quantity is less than the efficient quantity and a deadweight loss arises. Taxes creates deadweight loss, which is called excess burden of the tax, the amount by which the burden of the tax exceeds the tax revenue received by the government. The incidence of tax or how tax is split and the size of its excess burden depend on the elasticities of demand and supply in the following ways. For a given elasticity of supply, the more inelastic the demand for the good, the larger is the share of the tax paid by the buyer. For a given elasticity of demand, the more inelastic the supply of the good, the larger is the share of the tax paid by the seller. The excess burden is smaller, the more inelastic is demand or supply. 8.1 Practice problem. Explain how the taxes change price and quantities are shared by buyers and sellers in creating efficiency. Figure 1 shows the market for basketballs when basketballs are not taxed. If buyers of basketballs are taxed $6 a ball, what price does the buyer pay and how many do they pay? What is the tax revenue collected? So this is the first question, and this is the figure before the tax. With $6 tax on buyers, the demand curve vertically shifts downwards by $6 a ball as shown in figure 1. You can see the arrow mark of $6 down, the demand curve down by $6 vertically. The new equilibrium quantity is 8 million basketball per week now. The seller receives $10 as price without tax. The price that the buyer pays is $16 a basketball and 8 million basketball a week are bought. The price have increased by only $1 from $15 to $16. It means buyers pay only $1 burden of the tax, whereas the rest of $5 is borne by the seller. Here the supply is inelastic, therefore sellers bear most of the tax. The tax revenue is 6 times 8 million, which is 48 million a week. The purple rectangle in figure 2 is collected by the government. The second question. If sellers of the basketball are taxed $6 a ball, what price that the seller receive and how many do they sell? What is the tax revenue collected? Now the seller is taxed. Let's see what happens. With $6 tax on sellers, the supply curve shifts vertically upward by $6 a ball as shown in figure 3. Because the cost of production increases by $6, the supply curve shifts leftwards, and draw a vertical line from the dot at the equilibrium point and add a +6, that is the original price is 15 plus 6 is 21. So there draw a supply curve after tax. So this is the first step. The after tax, the new equilibrium is at where the demand curve intersect the supply curve after tax. Now the new price paid in the market is $16. That is the price paid by the consumer, and the quantity will reduce from 12 million quantity to 8 million as the prices rise. The price that the seller receives is $10 a basketball after tax, and 8 million basketballs a week are sold. The prices have increased by only $1 from $15 to $16 at new equilibrium. The consumer pays only $1 of tax burden, and the rest $5 is borne by the seller as the supply is inelastic. The tax revenue is $6 times 8 million, which is $48 million a week, collected by the government. If basketballs are taxed at $6 a ball, what is the excess burden of the tax? If the demand for basketballs and the supply of basketballs more inelastic, explain your answer. The excess burden of the tax is $12 million. Excess burden equals the deadweight loss, the great triangle, which is 4 million balls times 6 a ball divided by 2, that is the area of the triangle. The $6 tax increases the price paid by buyers by $1 and lowers the price received by sellers by $6. Because the seller pays the larger share of the tax, the supply of basketball is more inelastic than the demand for basketballs. So these are the true and false which I have solved. And these are multiple choice questions. Another practice problem. In the picture you can see the original equilibrium, the price is $12 and the quantity is 12. When the government puts a tax, the supply curve shifts upwards. And the first question is, what is the per unit tax? The per unit tax is the vertical distance between the supply curve, which is $3. So the second one is, what is the total revenue of the government? The total revenue earned by the government is the tax paid both by consumer and the producer, which is the rectangular, the shaded rectangle of both green and pink in the picture. That is $3 times the total unit or the quantity supplied, that is $30. The third question is, what is the total amount of tax paid by consumers? So here the demand is relatively inelastic. So the total, the more tax is paid by the buyer here. So the tax per unit is $2. Originally it was 12. After tax, the price increased to $14. So the consumer is paying $2 for every unit of good purchased. So $2 times the total quantity supplied is $10. So the total amount of tax paid by the consumer is $20. So the total amount of tax paid by producer is $10 because $1 is the tax he's paying to the government, because the total tax increased is or levied by the government is $3, and the $2 the consumer is paying, the rest $1 is paid by the producer, because the original price that the producer was getting was $12. Now he is getting only $11. That means $1 less than the original price. So he's paying the tax of $1, and the total quantity sold is $10 with 10 quantity. So 1 times 10 is $10 is the amount of tax paid by the producer. What is the total expenditure after tax? That is $14 times $10 times total quantity, that is $140 is the total spending after tax. And what is the total revenue for the firm here? So the revenue is the total quantity sold times the price. That's the revenue of the firm. So the total price it is getting after tax is $11 for every unit of goods sold, and the total quantity it is supplying or the selling in the market is 10. So 10 times 11 is $110 is the total revenue for firm. Hope this helps. Thank you.